I think it is true that if you took every single newsroom and put people on truth serum, that there's more people who probably have a liberal background than not. So I don't think that that's an unfair critique. I think what's an unfair maybe critique or not generally known would be, I worked at the Washington Post, I worked at the Wall Street Journal, I started Politico, I started Axios, so I have a pretty good sample size of reporters. I think most reporters, despite their own personal politics, do try to get to the closest approximation of the truth and try to do it in a clinical way. Are there times where they screw it up, or maybe because their background, they're not as familiar with faith, or they're not as familiar with the gun culture or the hunting culture? Yes. But I do think in general, I wish that people, readers in particular, didn't assume the worst about every single news organization and every single reporter, because I feel we then go down this dangerous road where nobody believes anything. And in a world where nobody believes anything, you have like intellectual anarchy. And within intellectual anarchy, I think bad things will happen. And so I think the media has a responsibility to try to be as clinical and as fair as humanly possible. We certainly try to do it at Axios. I encourage anybody at other news institutions to do the same. And then I encourage people on the consumption side to just know your sources and maybe like try to find things you trust and not get so hopped up.
I completely disagree. I don't want to start it on a disagreeable note, but I totally disagree with all of that. I think that the agenda is so patently clear. And I do want our audience to know, Steve Bannon was on the show a couple weeks ago singing your praises. I mean, Politico and Axios are just incredibly powerful news organizations, and they're yours. You know, like not Politico anymore, but you started it. Without you, we wouldn't have had it. And you were this kid who I know had a crappy GPA at Wisconsin and said, you know what, they're telling me I have no future, but I'm going to go create one for myself. And boy, have you. And I appreciate everything you've done. However, just completely disagree on the bias in the media. I just think it's in your face every day. What's happening with the border czar, whitewash today is just today's example of it. But I mean, let's go bigger. Let's talk about what they've been doing with Biden. You know, it was like everything about his health was downplayed. People were attacked. The White House reporters weren't reporting on it. They didn't even know that the Parkinson's doctor had been visiting the White House. They didn't care to check or, look at any of that. And then they stuck the knives in him for months, well, weeks, I guess, since the debate. And then as soon as he left screen, it's like, he's the greatest. He's wonderful. Joe Biden is a patriot. It was like, you all stuck the knife in him because he was no longer useful.
Okay, I'll take it. I'll take that. So what I would say, going back to find a source that you trust, if you go back and look at Axios coverage, which is the only one I can really defend with personal knowledge, we've written a lot about that, like an extraordinary amount, to the point
you did a great job in covering his post-debate problems.
I don't give a crap if we have friction with any White House. We're trying to get to the truth. So there was a source of truth, would have been Axios in this case, where we were reporting on that. It was out there. And I agree that other news institutions weren't as aggressive on a topic that you could see with your own eyes. And it's a very valid topic.
Cheap fakes, they said.
Pardon?
They were saying cheap fakes. It wasn't just they weren't aggressive, but I mean, you had NBC and CBS and CNN and MSNBC saying the evidence that we were watching before our eyes was not what we know it was.
Yeah, I can't defend other news organizations. I can say there were people in the mainstream media, us I would put on that list, who were covering it aggressively. And that's what you need to find. You need to find sources of truth that you believe that are trying to get to the truth and get to the closest approximation of it. Doesn't mean we get every single thing right, or that there aren't things that I would critique that we do. It's my job to do that all the time and to recalibrate and just make sure we have the right people doing the right coverage. But it is out there. And I do still think that people take these outlier cases and then assume that everything the Post or NBC or Times writes is crap, or it's partisan or it's biased. I just don't think that to be true. Like, I read a lot of these publications quite religiously, worked at some of them, and I would argue at a lot of those places, they have some really good reporters. And the ones who are really good on topics I care about, I try to follow because I find it edifying. I find that I walk away with it knowing something I didn't know. If someone kind of reeks of bias, and they exist, you and I both know that, I don't follow them. I just don't. And like, the test for us is like you use Steve Bannon, right? Like I know he's a reader of Axios, and I'm sure there's a lot that we write. He'll jokingly like text us and say you're a damn communist, and like, but I know he's reading us every day because he believes that we are getting to the closest approximation of the truth, and that's part of the job. And it's again, it's like it comes with the gig, right? Like media is just it's front and center. It's part of everybody's life, and everyone has an opinion on it.
I don't think Axios is anywhere near the worst offender. I mean, you probably wouldn't even be on this show if you were, right? Because you wouldn't want to talk to somebody like me. But I don't agree with in giving the mainstream media like widely a pass or an assumption that most are operating in good faith. That hasn't been my experience. And, I've been on more conservative type media side for all of my career. So I've seen it through a different lens entirely. I know you were with the Journal, but it was a short stint. So I've been 20 years in conservative media. And it's just when you're a conservative and you see your ideals being bashed at every turn and reduced to a pounce when you say, what? Then you develop these opinions. But since we're going there, let's talk about Axios, because the example that's in the news today, and I'm looking here at a Free Press piece by a guy named Peter Savodnik. He's calling you guys out in particular for this border czar thing. And he takes us back to March 2021, where you guys published a story with the headline, Biden puts Harris in charge of border crisis. Biden puts Harris in charge of border crisis. And it was done by your politics reporter, Steph Kite, K-I-G-H-T, who she informed us in that piece that Harris would be addressing the migrant surge at the U.S.-Mexico border, that Harris would lead the efforts with Mexico and the Northern Triangle, meaning Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, to manage the flow of unaccompanied children and migrant families arriving at the border. And we understood at the time that this was a big deal. President Biden had said that he was going to turn to Harris for his biggest responsibilities, and this was one of them. Then today, today, right? Today's July 24th. The same reporter, I guess that was yesterday, the same reporter, the same outlet, yours, put out a story headline, Harris border confusion haunts her new campaign, reporting that, in fact, back in 21, Biden enlisted Kamala Harris to help with just a slice of the migration issue. And now there's confusion around the VP's exact role, and that early media misfires and the rapidly changing regional migration crisis has made the issue a top target for the GOP, trying to define their new opponent. Meantime, she had said the same. And then you guys added a note to your own earlier report saying we, Axios, were among the news outlets that incorrectly labeled Harris a border czar in 2021 after all the blowback. So, Jim, people look at it, they're like, this isn't even Harris isn't talking about this. She wasn't out there saying, don't call me a border czar. So what made you go back and amend your earlier reporting?
Again, okay, so I wasn't personally involved in this, but it's my company, so I will talk about it. So when you talk about a czar, there's a czar, which is like an official appointment. Like we have a car.
We don't really have czars.
Well, people have used that term in the past when they appointed somebody to have basically specific control over a portfolio, right? And so to me, like this whole argument about whether she's a czar or not a czar is a semantical thing, right? It's not actually a substantive thing. Like the truthful thing is, was she involved deeply in the Biden-Harris immigration policy and what happened at the border? Absolutely. Was she fully responsible for their immigration policy and border control? Absolutely not. She didn't. I don't think she had the trust of the administration at that time to be able to control that entire portfolio. Were there parts of it where she had say? And I think the president himself even said she speaks for us or speaks for me on parts of this portfolio. Absolutely. Should she have to explain and defend the immigration policy and the border issues under the Biden-Harris administration? Well, of course she should. Like, why shouldn't she? She is the number two in the U.S. government, and we have an issue at the southern border that is arguably the biggest topic in the swing states that are going to decide the election. So whether you call her a czar, don't call her a czar, she was intimately involved in the policy. Undoubtedly is going to have to defend it, and will have no choice but to defend it because it's one of the top couple of issues that voters care about. Certainly, it's not just Republican voters. There's a lot of Democrats and independents who care about it and see it as a legitimate crisis. And they want to understand between the two candidates, what are you going to do about it? If we have all these people trying to swarm over our border and we have people here who are here illegally, how are you going to take care of that problem and the derivative problems that flow from it, whether it's crime or the economic effect of having people here or not having people here? So to me, like this is one of those topics where people's heads explode and they spend it. Is it a czar? Is it not a czar? And you're actually losing focus on like, who gives a crap at the end of the day what the official term is? At the end of the day, what is the policy? Can she defend the policy? Does Trump have a superior policy? What would the effects of those policies be? And then for me, the voter, now that I know those things, if that issue is what I care about, how do I make a really educated decision come election day on who I should vote for based on that topic?
Do you owe back taxes? Pandemic relief is now over. Along with hiring thousands of new agents and field officers, the IRS has kicked off 2024 by sending over 5 million pay-up letters to those who have an unfiled tax return or have a balance owed. Don't waive your rights and speak with them on your own. Don't do that, for God's sake. Tax Network USA, a trusted tax relief firm, has saved over $1 billion in back taxes for their clients, and they can help you too. Whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, they can help you. Whether it's business or personal taxes, even if you have the means to pay, or if you don't, if you're on a fixed income, they can help finally resolve your tax burdens once and for all. Call 1-800-245-6000 for a private free consultation, or just visit tnusa.com/Megyn. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.